pleased to have Vito Graziano here for an Italian immigrant's journey as we follow the excursion of a young man who emigrated from Sicily to the United States in the late 1890s. So please join me in welcoming Vito to the library.
Thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to come on out here. I got to be careful not to walk in front of this because it has something called eye guard, and if I walk in front of it, it blocks the presentation. So I might stay over here. I usually like to walk around. I'm Italian. I tend to be very animated. So before we get started, how many? I saw there was a lot of people who were Italian, of Italian descent. And how many of you speak Italian?
Pretty much.
Okay, so we do have a couple of Italian speakers in the room. Very good, excellent. Well, what I'm going to do before we get started with the presentation, I'm going to teach you all some Italian. Okay. So this is going to be, very useful if you ever go to Italy. You're going to need this. So everybody, if your hands are free, get your hands ready, because with Italians you have to use your hands. You cannot talk without using your hands. So, when someone asks you a question when you get to Italy and you don't understand them, this is easy. You just say, or give it a shot. Okay? Now, if you go to an Italian restaurant and they put pineapple on the pizza, okay, this is what you tell them. Okay? If they put barbecue sauce and pineapple on the pizza, then you fit both hands and you step into it. You got to step into it, get your leg in there and everything. Now, if they give you food that's wonderful, you have two things you can do. Okay? You can do this, which means it's delicious. Or if it's really outstanding, usually works if you have a utensil in your hand. You just go. The facial expression has to go with it. You have to, just the best thing you've ever eaten in your life. And the reason this hand motion is like this is because you want more. I want more and more. Just keep bringing it. And they will. They keep bringing it. But, so that's your Italian lesson for the day. So everybody can speak a little Italian. Well, not speak. What the interesting thing through this research, Italian hand gestures, they've counted over 230 of them. They're definitely not deaf. I've been there. They're very loud people. They're just 230 hand gestures. Very crazy. So I'm going to get started with the presentation here. Giri e tornare is Sicilian, and what it means is there and back again. Okay? So it's a Sicilian phrase. I'm a Sicilian descent, and I distinguish the two. We are Italian now, of course, everybody has been unified, but I distinguish the two, and I'm going to get into it a little bit here in the presentation. So I want to get the cart before the horse here, so I will go in order here. Genealogy is something that piqued my interest. I love history, and then I started thinking about genealogy and how it connects me to my ancestors. So what I found was this graph, which is absolutely amazing to me, that you're down here, and if you go all the way up to here, there's 4,096 people that didn't know each other, that were walking around on this planet, that somehow cooperated, and it came to you. That's all of us. If you go back 12 generations to your 10th great grandparents, that's 4,090. That was absolutely fascinating to me. That's 30 years per generation. That brings us back to 1665. Absolutely amazing to me that when you think about those numbers, it's just math, but still when you sit down to think about it, it's sobering, right? And then this is my why. I wondered, who are these people? How come I know so few of them? And I know a lot of my family members, but still, when you think about it in these terms, you know little history. You know little about these people. So that's what got me started on this, and that's what got me digging into my family and, how that came to be. So some of the things I thought about is a lot of those, the vast majority of those people there are dead. They're not around. They're not here to tell their story. No one's here to tell their story. So what I thought about was we don't really just die once. We die, everyone's going to die, but we die, but then our true death comes when nobody remembers us anymore. So we want to be remembered, but we're not all Napoleon, so we're not going to be in the history books. But you have to keep those memories alive in your own family. So that's what I am trying to do here, and I'm trying to encourage and inspire others to do the same as well. Ancient and tribal traditions used to keep those memories alive. When you got together, they used to talk about them. They used to talk about the grandfather's grandfather and this, and all these people and how they connected to you. It fostered this sense of belonging to your family, to being part of something that was bigger than just you and who you are. It removed this arrogance that you are this big deal, and you're not that big of a deal, but yet you are that big of a deal because so many people conspire to bring you to be here. You know, sadly, we've lost this skill. You know, when we do get together with family, we talk about what's going on at work, what's going on here, what's going on there. As the older generation now in my family, I tell stories. I tell the stories of the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, we tell those stories, and I make a point of telling those stories to my family. I make a point of telling those stories to people who are coming to these events. And the reason for it is to keep the memories of those people alive. Good, bad, or indifferent. You got to tell those stories. Our ancestors' lives should be remembered. You know, they may not have been, you know, again, Napoleon or president or a senator or anything special. They might have just been like my dad. My dad worked very hard. He prospered and made sure that we were in a better place than he was. That was his goal in life. You know, it was a very simple goal, but he achieved it. He achieved his goal. He was successful in that. And my dad was a teamster. He worked very, very hard his whole life. So I make sure to instill in my boys that they understand the stories about him. When he came here, he worked 3 different jobs. Within 4 years, he bought a house. He did nothing that was illegal. He worked his ass off. That's what he did, night and day, till he was able to buy himself something because he didn't want to live in someone else's house. That's what I remember him saying that. The man was so strong, it was unbelievable the strength he had. And I'm proud of that, and I can instill that in my family, and I encourage you to pick those stories out about individuals in your family and tell them. But like I said, sometimes even a simple, humble man or woman will do great things. Then you have to really focus on that. That's what this story is about. But first, I'm going to talk about Sicily. I want you to, I need to set the stage. Sicily is a very unique country. No country. Sicily was a country for many, many years before it was part of Italy. These are the different major powers that ruled Sicily, and they're in order of how long they ruled there, not of when they ruled there, because the Greeks were there much before the Romans were. But 650 years of Roman rule, then the Greeks 524, the Spanish, the Byzantines, the Arabs, and then the Normans came, and they were there for another 130 years. Okay, and there's a lot of architecture from all of them, all over the island. If you go to Italy, you see ruins from the Romans predominantly, but if you go to Sicily, you see ruins that were way before the Romans. Sicily has some ruins in beautiful areas. You go down by Agrigento down there, you're going to find ruins from the Greek temples down there. They're just phenomenal. They're phenomenal. They're just as elaborate and beautiful as any Greek temples that you'll find in Greece. As a matter of fact, some of the great philosophers were from actually Sicily, but they were Greeks. And there's a town, there's an area in Sicily where they still speak a form of Greek, and that's their dialect to this day. This is, over 2,000 years ago since the Greeks have been kicked out of there, but they still hold that. So the Sicilians who were there were brought into all these different great cultures because Sicily is in the middle of the Mediterranean. Every powerful nation of the Mediterranean in Europe wanted that as their jewel, as their prize, and they took it. So as Sicilians, we had to learn to live under foreign rule pretty much for the entire existence of Sicily. Okay? So we're going to go on to Italy and Sicily in the 1890s. So we see this flag here, and that's very similar to the current Italian flag. And you know what? Excuse me here. I just have to start my music here. My apologies. The Italian national anthem. You don't have to stand. Sorry, it's an abbreviated version. But the Italian flag looks very similar to that, except it doesn't have that standard. When Italy was unified in the 1850s, people think Italy's an old country. It's not. It's 1850s is when it was unified. Before that, Sicily and many other regions were their own country. But we had a king, and that's their crest. That was the Savoy family, and they were the king when Italy became a country. After World War II, they got rid of the king and it became a republic. Okay? But at that time of unification, at the time of this story, there was a king and Italy was in charge of Sicily. And this is the Sicilian flag. And that is indicative of the Sicilian people. It's red and yellow, and it has a triconia in the center there. And that red and yellow is very loud and very in your face. And if you've been to Sicily or if you've met Sicilian people, we're loud and we're in your face. Okay, so that's accurate. So, and this down here is a Norman, crest, and this is the crest of my hometown. So that's why I included it there. That crest is for a town called Cimina, and I'm going to tell you more about that in just a moment. But the unification sounds great, and it was great in many respects. But the Sicilians were happy at first because we threw the French out. The French were there, and they weren't very friendly to Sicilians. We threw them out, Bourbons, we threw them out. But then the Sicilians realized the northern Italians were just as nasty and took everything of value and left the Sicilians with little or nothing. So once again, they're in the same boat. Education and work. The Italians implemented their language and took away our language. Sicilian, if spoken purely, a northern Italian won't understand. He might get the gist of what you're saying, but it's a different language. It's not a dialect. People say, oh, I speak the Sicilian dialect. It's a language, and it needs to be treated as such because it was a language, and it was taken away from the Sicilian people by the northern Italians. They implemented the Italian language in schools, but when they unified, they didn't have any money, so they didn't have money to pay for books, they didn't have money to pay for schools, and they didn't have money to pay for teachers, but they said, you have to learn this language. So they threw it upon them. Work was basically an agrarian community. They worked the land, they worked the animals, they had herds, they fished. This was the economy in Sicily, and that's what people did. The mafia. Hollywood glamorizes the mafia. Hollywood doesn't do it justice. Hollywood just plays up the big deal. The mafia was formed because of this. When they threw the Bourbons out after the unification, the mafia was formed because the Italian government didn't have money to pay for police, and the soldiers that were there were only there to guard the federal buildings and such, to make sure the politicians weren't hurt and to make sure that the taxes were being collected. That's all the soldiers are there for. They weren't worried about policing the towns and the people who now, the land that the Bourbons evacuated, the Sicilian people started working those lands and owning those lands. They were having a problem getting their goods to market, or once they did sell it in market, they had money, and they were being robbed, and bandits were taking that, and crime was rampant. So what they did is they started hiring these tough guys to protect them. Well, the tough guys realized, well, we got the power. So they are the ones that started imposing their will on the Sicilian people. So the mafia back then was called the Black Hand, La Mano Nera, the Black Hand. And they called it the Black Hand because that Black Hand was in everything. You couldn't move without the Black Hand being paid and getting a portion and getting a chunk of it. So these people extorted the true businessmen, extorted the true workers for their own benefit. Just because they were stronger, tougher, and willing to do things such as murder or beating people, where the normal people weren't willing to do that stuff. You know, they were very Catholic, extremely Catholic. Back in that time, I would say it was probably 99%. I don't know what it is now, but it's still very high. The town I come from has 7,000 people. There's 12 Catholic churches. Okay? And they're beautiful. They're exquisite. They're beautiful churches. I've been to quite a few of them. Not all of them, quite a few of them. There's a St. Vito's there. Can't go in that one though because the roof is collapsing, so they're working. But I've never been in. But that said, the religion was that, and that's the vision of the mafia in Sicily, and that's how it started. Customs and superstitions. Sicilians are very, very superstitious people. We tend to be, you don't gift a knife to someone. They got to buy their own knife. So if someone puts that on their bridal registry, no, you can't. They got to buy their own knife. I can't buy a knife for them. God forbid someone stabs someone, then they blame me for it. So that's just one thing. You see these little Italian horns, very common. You see the hands. The little hand, because they think that someone can, by looking at you, gives you something called the malocchio, which is the evil eye. And if you have the hand, boom, you give it right back to them. So now it's like, hey, remember when you were a kid? I'm rubber, you're glue. What you say to me bounces off me, sticks to you. That was the intellect. That was the logic of that. So very superstitious people back then and today. So that hasn't changed much. So, but rather than give you a bunch of graphs and history and that sort of thing, I thought I would tell you a story about an ancestor of mine. My ancestor was Vito Graziano, coincidentally enough. My father was named Vito Graziano. I was named Vito Graziano. My great-grandfather was Vito Graziano. We have a few people in the family that are not named Vito, but mostly Vito Graziano. Traditional Italians, when you have a son, you name him after the first son, you name him after the paternal grandfather. If you have a second son, that son needs to be named after the maternal grandfather. Well, my mom's father was named Vito. So I'm the second boy. So I wasn't named after my father, technically, I was named after my grandfather. But lots of Vitos in the family. But without further ado, I'm going to jump into the actual program about Vito here, and we'll tell you a little bit about him. I want to highlight this song here a little bit. This song is by a folk singer in Sicily, and her name is Anna Granata. And the guitarist, of course, is Rocco Giorgi. Anna has, I'm going to turn the volume down a little bit, sorry. There we go. But a lot of the music that I have back here, going to be playing here, is folk music. And the reason I'm playing it is because when I was a little kid, we went to Sicily, and I grew up in Chicago. What do I know about Italian culture except, we eat a lot of food and everybody yells. But it was fun growing up Italian in Chicago. But when I went to Sicily, I realized, wow, this is where all this comes from, and I get it. And there was this one night where all the ladies were sitting in chairs, and there was a big circle right in the middle of the street outside of someone's house. They had this big pot of green beans, and they were cleaning the green beans. And they were putting them down, and they were all chatting and such. And then they would start singing songs. And this song was one of the songs they sang. And when I heard this version of it, it choked me up. I was like, oh my God, I remember. My mom and her sisters and family were all sitting around this, and it was just beautiful. I've never experienced anything like that. As a little kid, I remember I just sat on the curb and I just watched them, and I was fascinated by it. And I thought it was beautiful back then. I think it's beautiful now. So I wanted to share that with you, and I wanted to open the story of Vito Graziano with that. So Vito Graziano lived in Sicily, and here's some stock photos that I found on the internet of that period from Sicily. It was a very poor country. Those are the docks at Palermo. Fishing was very, very prominent back then. And you'll notice how small these boats are. These men had sails on those boats, but if the wind wasn't blowing favorably, they rowed their way out into the Mediterranean to catch their catch. They'd cast nets, and they'd have to haul those nets out by hand. They'd have to haul them back in by hand. And they rowed their way back in by hand. Very strong men, hard-working men, earned their money, every penny of it. I took this picture and I put it in here because that reminded me of the story I just told about the green beans, except these men are playing cards. And if you've ever been to Italy and you get a chance to watch Italian men play cards, very entertaining. You gotta watch it. It looks like they're about to punch each other at any minute, but they're not. That's just what they do. They yell at each other when they're playing cards, and they slam the card down with great passion as they're winning and take it, and it's fun to watch. And I've played in some of those games, and it is fun. So this is a picture. It's not from the period, but it's from my hometown. My father's in that picture, and some of my relatives are in that picture, so I thought I'd share. This guy looks particularly menacing. Looks like a guy you don't want to mess around with. So, I don't know him, but this is a picture, again, of Sicily, of the period. And this I posted because these men are wearing all white, and these sashes are actually red. And what they do is they carry these statues through town, and they have a procession. And this procession is religious in origin. So the Virgin Mary is in this particular one, and that's a very important festival in my hometown of Cimina. And this town celebrates this to this day, this festival. And the men still dress all in white, and they still carry the statue around, and the rest of the townspeople kind of follow behind them. And then afterwards, it's a big festival. And then I have some family photos here of the period, and these are the ancestors that I'll be talking about, and these are the ancestors that have brought us to where we are now. But on to the main subject here. Who was Vito? The information I have, that's an AI-generated photograph. I don't have pictures of someone from the 1890s. We were very poor, and there weren't very many photographs back then. But I like AI. They did a pretty good job here. Looks like a handsome young man. Kind of grubby looking, but that fits because they were very, very poor back then. But he's a handsome young man, and I hope my great-grandfather actually looked like that, because it's not a bad picture there. But Vito was born and grew up in Cimina, Sicily, after the unification, which meant Sicily was poor, and the unification made them poorer. Okay? They took even more away. Cimina is a very, very old community. Okay? There's evidence of the Romans there, there's evidence of Carthaginians there, and arguably the Phoenicians. They're trying to figure out if it was a Phoenician ruin or Carthaginian ruin, but that would make it even older. There is a Greek temple near the town, and that temple is to the goddess of Detmer, who was the goddess, the Greek mother of Earth. So when I say old, that's a different level of old than what we have here, okay? Vito worked with his father in a citrus grove, and they were sharecroppers, basically, for lack of a better term here. That's what would have been the equivalent. Okay. Vito was a devout Catholic. Now, I mentioned that Sicily was very Catholic. Vito is known in my family for being extremely Catholic. He was, there was no gray area with him. You went to church, and you prayed, and you gave to the church everything that you could, and you volunteered if you couldn't give. And that's the way he was, and that's the way he was to the day he died. Okay? He was also very poor. Okay? He had little or no formal education, but he learned 3 languages. Okay? He was highly respected by his friends and family. Again, those are facts. We know that. He was respected in our town. He was highly respected in our town. He had a calm and pensive demeanor. He was not a big man. He was not a huge muscle guy. You know, I guess the apple doesn't far from the tree. Pardon me. But he was known to put people in their place with his mouth and physically. He was known that he was a guy you just didn't mess around with because he had a line, and if you crossed it, it was bad news for you. He often talked to the longshoremen who came to the groves to pick up the lemons, the citrus and such, and that's where they planted the seed in him about going to the new country, going to the United States. He loved Vita, Vito and Vita. That is real. That was a real couple, and they absolutely loved each other. And again, I don't have a photograph of her, but AI created this beautiful young lady here. And again, I have no problem with that. If that was the way she looked when she was 16 or 18, God bless. A couple of gorgeous people here, and you know, they led to me. So, you know, the crossing. So Vito wasn't able to give the life that he wanted to Vita. So he was talking to his friends about how he could accomplish that. How he could accomplish that. These longshoremen, these sailors had told him about it. Go to the United States. Streets are paved with gold. There's money on the trees. You can just become rich just by getting off the boat. You get rich instantly. So Vito decides to go. Comes up with a plan. He doesn't have the money. So he's like, how am I going to figure this out? Well, one of his best friends had a cousin. We'll call him Paulo. Again, an AI-generated guy. Paulo was a sailor on a boat called the Darlington. The Darlington's a real boat. It went from Sicily to New Orleans, brought citrus, picked up cotton in New Orleans, brought it back to Sicily. So this trade had been going on for decades, long before the unification. This was an established trade route, and this was something that had been going on for decades. This is not something that the Italian government invented. This is an existing trade route. But back then, the boats weren't made for people. Immigration had just started. The boats weren't made for people, they were made for cargo. And these ship captains realized, we can make a lot of money charging these people. And so they started charging the people, and they were putting them on these cargo boats. But the cargo boats weren't designed to hold people. They had no facilities for restrooms. They didn't have enough storage area for food. They didn't have sleeping quarters for these people. So these people were lying on floors. Bathrooms were, I don't even want to get into that. The food was, you're getting fed once a day. And these weren't ocean liners like they are now. These weren't fast ships. It would take weeks to get across. And these people lived in these horrible conditions. And, you know, they did what they had to do to get across to try to better their lives. Paulo got Vito on the boat. They used someone else's name, someone that didn't show up. Just don't worry about it. There's always someone that doesn't show up. We'll just use their name. You get on the boat. 16-year-old Vito, that's a great idea. Let's do it. Once they're out in the water, Paulo comes to him and he says, hey, what's your plan to get off when you get to New Orleans? And Vito said, well, what do you mean? I thought that was part of the deal. Didn't you know, I paid you, and he goes, yeah, that money was for me and the sailors. You paid us off, but what about New Orleans? What are you going to do there? You got to go through customs. You got to go through the medical check. You got to go through all this. So Paulo had an angle. See, this wasn't his first rodeo. Paulo's angle was he's going to introduce Vito to this guy. This is Don Carlo. Don Carlo was La Mano Nera, the Black Hand. So the Black Hand, they were in everything. The Black Hand was in everything, including bringing people from Italy over to the United States. Don Carlos said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of everything. You work for me, I'll take care of everything. You don't have to worry about anything. Well, Vito knew guys like Don Carlo. This was not someone new to him. So he said, no, I'll figure it out. I don't need to be indebted to you. Don Carlo was surprised with this, and he started talking to Vito more and more. And he gained a respect for Vito. But if Vito wasn't going to take his deal, he wasn't going to help him. But he was amused. He liked Vito. And a lot of the people on the boat liked Vito. Vito was very charismatic. Vito was well liked everywhere he went. Well, the problem is, the boat came to New Orleans, and Vito, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, I'm not exactly sure how old he was when he came, but he was young. Now he's panicking, and he's looking around, he's going to jump in the water and swim. How am I going to get off this boat? Don Carlo was very calm, and he was about to get off the boat with some other folks. So Vito said, hey, you still have that deal available. Can we take that deal? Can I still take that deal? And Don Carlo said, yeah. Get in line, don't worry about it. He goes, I have a job for you. I have someplace for you to stay. You don't have to worry about anything. I've got it all worked out. So Vito took the deal, got off the boat, and they went to customs with no problem. Everybody was going in a line. Don Carlo didn't get in line. Don Carlo walked around the line to the office. They walked in the office. Everybody knew Don Carlo. Everybody was shaking Don Carlo's hand, was welcoming him, paying no attention to the people that were with him. Don Carlo put envelopes down on the table. They were all loving Don Carlo. Then Don Carlo said, well, see you later. He walked through the outdoor, and they all walked out behind him. No questions asked. No one asked anything. Now, Vito is in New Orleans. And he's in a new world. He's seen docks before, but he's never seen docks like in New Orleans. What are paddle boats? He's seen people before, but he's never seen the people like we're in New Orleans. He's had food, but he's never smelled food. He's never heard the music. He's completely shocked. He is in absolute culture shock. He doesn't know what he's gotten himself into. He is completely afraid, and the only one there that he has to depend on is the Black Hand, the evil, the bad guy. That's his only friend. That's his only recourse there. He's not in a good position. He's got no options, really. He has to go with Don Carlo. So Vito, his new world, he gets introduced to is a butcher shop. This is a stock photo from online. Obviously, they didn't have photographs of where my great-grandfather worked. But that's a butcher shop from the period. Sawdust on the ground, hooks for the meat. Remember, back then there was no refrigeration, so the meat was killed, the cattle was killed in the morning, and by the end of the day it was sold. You came late to the butcher shop, you didn't get meat. That's all there was to it. They only killed enough for the day. And it was true with all the animals. And that's where Vito worked. He got a job at the butcher shop. Don Carlo got him a job. By the way, the butcher shop was owned by Don Carlo. And then Vito stayed at a boarding house with all these other Italian, Sicilian men who had small rooms upstairs. The main floor was a bar or a restaurant. And coincidentally, that was owned by Don Carlo. So it was a boarding house. Then he worked. This is a photograph of what initially appeared to me as children, like school-age children, but they were actually workers, because back then, children worked everywhere, and that was very common. And Vito was older, but he was still young, and he had to work. Enter Father Pasquale. Vito was devoutly Catholic, so one of the first things he did was went to the church. And he found Father Pasquale, and Father Pasquale was Sicilian. So Vito had a connection with him, and he formed a friendship with him, and he will be a pivotal role in Vito's future, as we will get into. Vito settles into his life. This is his new life there. He's learning his trade. He actually likes the trade of being a butcher because he realizes no matter where I go, I can use this trade. This is something that I can use the rest of my life. This is a good thing that I'm learning this. So Vito was very happy, and he was assigned to a butcher as an apprentice. Vito started to learn English. Working in the butcher shop, yes, most of the workers there and most of the clients were Italian, and Sicilian specifically. But they also had clients that came in that weren't Italian speaking because it was New Orleans. So he learned English. Father Pasquale, Padre Pasquale, was pivotal in that, helping him and all the immigrants learn English. These photographs are stock photographs of New Orleans in the period, so this is very, very much what it might look like back then, or what it did look like back then. But Vito's role in terms of Don Carlo became apparent to him. Because Vito was new at this, Vito was basically an errand boy. He was sent with envelopes and with packages to different places, dropping off envelopes, picking up envelopes, dropping off packages, picking up packages. And because of this, again, Vito was interacting with a lot of different people, not just Italians. So he learned more and more English at the time. Don Carlo heard about Vito's prowess with the fists, and he wanted him to strong-arm people if necessary. And Vito refused, and he said he would not intentionally hurt anybody, or definitely not kill anybody. He would say this to Don Carlo, and Don Carlo was amused with this. He looked at him as this young boy who didn't know anything, and he said, yeah, okay, you just keep thinking that. That's the way it's going to be, and that's the way it'll be. For now, just do what I'm telling you to do, and we'll worry about the other stuff and let that take care of itself. So then, the fight. Vito was sent to a hotel that, I'll put the word hotel in parentheses. It was basically a brothel in New Orleans, and it was one of his regular stops to pick up an envelope to bring back to Don Carlo. And Don Carlo owned that hotel as well, and all the operations that went in there were under Don Carlo's command. The man didn't have the envelope, so Vito said, okay, no worries. I'll just go let Don Carlo know you didn't have the envelope. Well, the man took that to be a threat. What do you mean by that? You're gonna, what's that mean? What does it mean? I don't have the envelope. You don't have the envelope. What am I supposed to do? I got to tell them I didn't have it, or you didn't have it. The man became very aggressive with him, got angry with him. Fight ensued. Well, this man was known in New Orleans as a brawler. He was a big dude, tough guy, was a brawler. He ran a brothel for a reason. If anybody got out of line, he would put them in line and throw their butts out. So there was this tough guy. Well, this scrawny little Sicilian guy named Vito knocked the guy on his butt, knocked him out. So Vito wasn't quite sure what to do, so he went back and told Don Carlo the truth, what had happened, And Vito thought he was going to get in trouble. Don Carlo looked at him and started laughing. He said, "You knocked out the big guy?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Alone?" "Yeah." "No way. You're telling me a tall tale." It wasn't a tall tale. Don Carlo found out that it wasn't a tall tale. Everything changed after that. All his friends were treating him different and started talking to him different and were impressed by him, and he was like, what? It was nothing, And they're like, well, that's exactly why it is something, because you think it was nothing. This is a photograph, the one over here is a photograph of New Orleans. That's St. Joseph's Day, and that's a real photograph of St. Joseph's Day. St. Joseph's Day is a huge celebration in the Italian community. To this day, it's a huge celebration in the Italian community. But that was a photograph of St. Joseph's Day, and just outside of an area called Little Palermo. Everybody knows the French Quarter. Well, Little Palermo is right next to the French Quarter. It was very heavily populated by Sicilians. Well, when he went to that festival, he was having fun, and he got to eat food that they only had at St. Joseph's Day, and he loved it. It reminded him of Sicily. So he loved that festival. Every year he would go. But this one was different. People were pointing at him and talking, and he noticed it. And he's asking his friends, what is all this about? Do you know? Why are they talking about it? He said, because you knocked that guy out. What do you think? They all are afraid of you now. They think you're some big tough guy you're in the Black Hand. You are the Black Hand to them. And Vito's like, I don't want to be that. I want to be a butcher. I don't want this. This is not what I want for my life. And his life is being pushed in a direction that he wants nothing to do with, but he has no idea how to stop it. Don Carlo loves it. Don Carlo's now got a tough guy who doesn't realize he's a tough guy, but everybody's afraid of him. Just him walking in the door strikes fear into people's hearts. And Don Carlo starts to trust Vito with more and more stuff. So Vito's working less and less at what he wants to do and not learning his trade, and working more and more for Don Carlo. So Vito is perplexed. He's constantly going to Padre Pasquale, and talking to him and trying to figure out a way out of this. Okay? But everybody knows, Don Carlo's amused with you right now. It's not going to last. If you continue to behave like this, that amusement will turn to anger very quickly. You have to watch what you're doing here very, very carefully. So this is the dilemma that Vito's in. Chief David Hennessy. Chief David Hennessy is an actual person. We don't have any photographs of him. But Vito would go there and drop money off. So he would go to the police station and drop envelopes off for the police so that they, would leave Don Carlo alone. And on this particular day, Chief Hennessy had told Vito he wanted more money. And Vito said, well, I don't put the money in the envelope. I just take the envelope and bring it to you. Chief Hennessy said, go get Don Carlo. So Don Carlo went to see Chief Hennessy. And the meeting did not go well. Chief Hennessy threatened Don Carlo. Chief Hennessy disrespected Don Carlo in front of Don Carlo's men and in front of Vito. That's something that can't be tolerated by the Black Hand. If your men see you disrespected, then that encourages them to kill you and take over. It's a very cutthroat world that Don Carlo lives in. He can't be disrespected. So he wants another meeting to renegotiate with Chief Hennessy. He tells Vito and 3 of his other men that we're going to go have a meeting with this Chief Hennessy and we're going to straighten him out. Well, Vito knows what that means. Vito knows that the only way to straighten out Chief Hennessy is to take him out. And Vito wants nothing to do with that. So Vito refuses to go to the meeting. And Don Carlo says, that's it. That's the line. You cross that line, you are on the outside looking in. You are no longer part of our group. Vito didn't go to the meeting. The next morning, Vito learned that Chief Hennessy had been shot and killed the night before. Chief Hennessy didn't die immediately. He lived briefly. As people ran to him, came to his aid. March 14th, 1891. Chief Hennessy said, the Dagos did it, and was quoted in the newspaper as saying, the Dagos did it. This was actually a quote in the newspaper of the time. Chief Hennessy said that was his dying breath. His dying words, literally, sounds like a novel. But that's a fact. The day was there. Well, that led to an investigation, an enormous backlash to the Italian community. They were treated poorly to begin with. After this, the way they were treated down there became abysmal. It's horrifying. You read the things that happened to Italians there that had nothing to do with crime or anything. They were just hardworking people. The things that were done to them was horrible. 19 men were arrested for this murder. 19 men were arrested for the murder of one. 11 were held long enough to go to trial. One of them was 14 years old. These were businessmen that owned businesses. These were hardworking people. These were not criminals that they rounded up. They were held in the Orleans Parish prison. None of them were convicted. They went to trial. None of them were convicted. 6 were acquitted altogether. 3 had mistrials and were awaiting a new trial. And 2 didn't even go to trial because they couldn't find anything to really charge them for. They were just holding them. These are photographs and pictures from the newspaper at the time, led by John Parker. A footnote on John Parker. Years after this incident, he became governor of Louisiana. So John Parker led the crowd that gathered outside of the prison. He and a few other men whipped up the crowd into a frenzy. 8,000 people were estimated to be out there, outside of the prison. They took a battering ram, literally bashed in the front door, and stormed the prison. They took 11 men out of the prison. They beat them savagely. Again, one of them was a boy of 14 years old. They took them out, they strung them up, and they lynched all 11 of them, killing them. And they did this in an area just outside the French Quarter, which again is right next to Little Palermo. So they did this to send a message to the Italian community, and they left those people hanging on those poles for days. The Italian-American community across the country became outraged. There were a lot of Italians here, and they became outraged. They couldn't believe that such a thing could happen. The Italian government recalled the ambassador from Washington. They threatened to stop all immigration from Italy to the United States. This became an enormous big deal. The Americans needed the immigrants to come. This was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. They needed people to come work. They needed people in the South to work the fields. They needed those bodies. They couldn't have this. They absolutely needed this to happen. 8,000 men took our laws, our rules of justice into their own hands and decided that they needed to take justice into their own hands and solve this. You got a young man, Vito. He's caught up in the middle of all of this. He's talking to Padre Pasquale. He's remembering the reason he's there. It's to create a better life for his future wife. That's what he wants to do. He just wants to get back to her and build a good life for her. Now he's in the middle of this. And you got Don Carlo. Well, Don Carlo knows that Vito is no longer his ally. He's looking for him. When Vito went to go talk to Padre Pasquale, Father Pasquale, he learned that Don Carlo had told the police that were on his payroll that Vito is the one that actually pulled the trigger to kill Chief Hennessy. The police knew that the 11 men who were lynched weren't the actual killers. They were still out looking for the actual killer. But they couldn't arrest him for killing Chief Hennessy because they had already lynched 11 Italians for it. So they had to find out another way. So Vito knew he's not going to survive this. If Don Carlo gets him, he's going to kill him. If the police get him, he's going to kill him. Or they're going to kill him. This is a young man. He's like, how did I get in the middle of all of this? It's an international incident. For God's sakes, what do I got to do with all of this? And the only ally he has is a priest, and Vito doesn't know what to do. So he's talking to Padre Pasquale. The conclusion is that New Orleans isn't for him. Vito longs for Vita, his family, and Sicily. He wants a simple life. That was his goal all along. He just wanted a simple life. Don Carlo goes to see Father Pasquale, and he basically threatens him. Says, if you know what's good for you, you better let me know where this kid is. Well, Vito told Father Pasquale the truth about what Don Carlo had said the night before Chief Hennessy was killed. And even the police that were on Don Carlo's payroll couldn't hide the fact that Don Carlo had killed the police chief. That was, even for these guys around the take, that was a line that you don't cross. So when they confirmed what Don Carlo had done, he got arrested. Not for that, murder, something else. They had plenty to arrest him on. And mysteriously, Don Carlo was found dead in his jail cell. Vito was able to get on a boat, quietly, and go back to Sicily, where he did actually marry Vita. And he had saved a little bit of money, so he did have a better life for her. And he built a better life for himself and for her and his family that came later. But his dream of coming here and bringing her here was dashed due to this incident that happened. Now, what happened with that incident, the way the government in the United States solved the problem was President Benjamin Harrison proclaimed October 12th, 1892 to be Columbus Day, the first Columbus Day. So when people look at a statue of Christopher Columbus and want to tear it down, they don't understand what that statue stands for. It's not about some explorer who came here and supposedly discovered America. It's about our culture. It's about the Italian people who were treated as they were when they came. The beatings, the arrests, the signs that said no Italians need apply. Being classified as a lower class of existence. This man, and I'm not going to say his name again because it disgusts me. He was quoted in the newspaper when he did run for governor. This man whipped up the frenzy he said the Italian people are actually worse than the subhuman African American. Except he didn't use the word African American. He said we were worse because when we bathe the Italian, and when the Italian learns our language, they can assimilate into our society and they will poison our bloodline. Then he was elected governor after he said this. So when someone says they want to take down the statue of Christopher Columbus, I remember that, not Christopher Columbus. I remember the people that died for this day of remembrance, for this month of remembrance. And and I know the work that the vast majority of Italian Americans do in this country was honest, hard labor. And they worked to better themselves. Hollywood just glorifies the Sicilian gangsters. The vast majority of Sicilians are not gangsters. The vast majority of Sicilians are like my family, hardworking people who love their families and want to better their lives and don't want to be criminals. And in fact, the criminals take advantage of those people, and that's how the criminals became these cool guys that drive fancy Cadillacs and order gabagool sandwiches. Italy forgot. We don't forget. We can't forget. Thank you very much.